Hello, welcome to the Omnivorous Bookworm. My name is Lauren, and in today's video I want to continue on in the Barsetshire series. I want to make a video for every book in the Barsetshire series. So now now we're on to Framley Parsonage, which is the number 4 book. So this obviously is by Anthony Trollope. It was published in 1860 and it takes place in the village of Framley. So it's in Barsetshire County, but it's in the Framley, I guess, I don't know what the term is, like a town, town. And so I gave this book 4 stars. I just finished it, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than Dr. Thorne, although we do get a lot of the same like recurring characters. But in this book we get a brand new main character as well. So our main character is Mark Robarts, and he is just a regular clergyman. I forget exactly how I should have marked what Anthony Trollope says about him, but he describes him as basically like your every man's man. Like, yes, he's in the clergy, but he's not particularly religious. He doesn't particularly think about, those types of things. He got good grades, but like was never outstanding. And he goes into the fact that the reason that Mark Robarts does so well in school, or I should say gets a good education, even though, so Mark Robarts, his dad is a doctor, which at this time was just a normal sort of working class job. Well, not working class, but like a normal professional job. He wasn't part of the elite. And because his dad put so much effort into his schooling, that's why Mark Robarts did well in school, which I think is a really interesting uh, way for Anthony Trollope to bring it up. And especially as a teacher, it is something that's very, we think of intelligence as being, you're born intelligent, and that's why you get a good job. But so often it's just the luck of the draw for who your parents are and how much effort they put into your education. So Anthony Trollope makes a lot of good assessments about that. So Mark Robarts is being educated with the wealthy family in town, the Luftons, and he grows up with Ludovic. They're like good friends. And then Ludovic's mother, Lady Lufton, because of this connection, that's why Mark Robarts gets this job in Framley. So she's the patron, she puts him there, and she's a very interesting character. She's not bad, she's not evil, she's definitely not like Lady Arabella and Dr. Thorne. But Lady Lufton is just really snobby. she really is not ashamed of it, which is interesting. But she does have character growth. She does sort of change over time. We also follow Mark Robarts' wife. Her name is Fanny. I really enjoyed her as well. I liked their relationship together. It shows, although she was a woman and legally didn't have a lot of rights, he does look to her, and when there's times that he doesn't want to disclose things to her, it's not in like oh, I don't have to, I'm more important than her. It's more like, I don't want to disappoint my wife. Like, and she's a very sort of, I mean, she's like him. She's very sweet, very just sort of unassuming, just wants to live her life. There's nothing particularly like extra special about her. And I always enjoy that with Anthony Trollope, because he picks these people who seem very mundane, and then, but we see that even the mundane people have very interesting stories. So so we have Fanny, and then Lucy is our main interesting character. So she is Mark Robarts' sister, younger sister. She comes to live with her brother because their father dies. And so as a woman, of course, she's not going to have a career. She's not going to live by herself. So she goes to live with her brother. And I really enjoyed how Anthony Trollope portrays her. She's described physically. A lot of characters describe her as being dumpy and dark. So I'm not sure if they meant like dark hair or dark eyes. they meant it in a non-flattering way. My assumption is they're referring to the fact that like maybe she's out in the sun more and like has more of a tan, and since she wasn't as concerned about that, I'm not exactly sure. They never really specify, but I think it's interesting because Lucy is our love interest. And Anthony Trollope often does that, where he'll pick women who sometimes are a little bit older or maybe are not the one that you would think would be the love interest. In this case, she's young, relatively young, um, but she's definitely not described by many people as being necessarily the most attractive. And then the most attractive woman he describes as like not being particularly wanted, or wouldn't make a very good wife because she's pretty dumb. So I think that's interesting how, as a man, that he portrays that. So anyway, we have Lucy Robarts. She's quiet. She's very quiet, kind of shy, but she doesn't like to be around people. So they describe her like going to parties and like sitting by herself and not really wanting to interact with people, not wanting to go to these social engagements. And but when she does have to say certain things, like when she does have to do certain things, she will make sarcastic remarks, or she will um and because it's Victorian England, like she knows she shouldn't be saying that, so she feels kind of like, oh yeah, don't put me with those people because I'll make some kind of comment. And I don't know, I enjoy that about her because she's like quiet and shy, but she will speak up for herself if she needs to without being, rude. So I enjoy that. So those are the Robarts, and then we have the Luftons, which is basically Lady Lufton, and then her son Ludovic, who is friends with Mark. And Ludovic introduces Mark to Mr. Sowerby and some other sort of political people, and they go to the Duke's house. And during this time, this is when Mark gets pressured into signing a note, which is basically like co-signing for Mr. Sowerby and taking on his debt. And Mr. Sowerby is known as a notorious debtor. Everybody knows he's kind of a loser and not to trust him. And Mark has absolutely no skills to deal with this guy, and so he signs the note for him. He takes on the debt without getting any money, and this starts this spiral of shame and mistakes. And he doesn't make it's kind of the same mistakes, but he ends up in this really bad situation because of that. And I always forget, that at this time, going into debt in this way, it wasn't just, oh, you might have to file bankruptcy, or oh, you might have to like give up some of your things to settle the debt. But it could also be prison time. So it's a very serious matter and very scary. And then also, at this time, obviously, your reputation is everything, especially as a clergy person. So imagine people think their like clergy person is a notorious gambler because he's like, you know, if they were to find out about this debt, So that's also sort of an interesting added layer that we have here. And of course, everybody cares about their reputation, much more than we would today. And I mentioned in my wrap up that there was no true antagonist, but I think I misspoke because Mr. Sowerby would be the closest thing to a true antagonist that we do have. He doesn't appear a ton, like page wise in the book, but the actions that he sets in motion are very important, like hugely important throughout the book. So he would be basically our antagonist. So we have those groups. We also get the Grantleys again. So we have the Archdeacon and Susan, who was Mr. Harding's daughter, and they have a daughter, Griselda. And Susan Grantley and Lady Lufton want Ludovic to marry Griselda, and they really are pushing it. And so Lady Lufton thinks that Griselda will be perfect because she comes from this very upstanding, wealthy clergy family, and she's extremely beautiful, but she's just described as being very plain, very dull, very not very bright. So she's pretty funny. We also get, well, she's not funny, but it's funny how they describe her. We also get Miss Dunstable again, and we get to see her more than in Dr. Thorne. I didn't talk about her a lot in Dr. Thorne, but I actually did enjoy her. She is older. She's like, I think she's described as being in her mid-40s and unmarried. Um, and she's extremely wealthy because she's gotten her father's fortune, but it's causing her a lot of problems because she can't she, she knows that whoever wants to marry her, any man, it's going to be because of her money. And she talks about trying to find somebody who doesn't care about money, and like, who does, who how is that possible, especially in the circles that she goes into. And Miss Dunstable is extremely sarcastic to the point that people don't know what to do with her. And because she's so wealthy, she gets away with it. But she's very abrasive, and it's described as this sort of armor, this sort of barrier to protect herself. Because I mean, they don't go into it, but it's obvious that she's been hurt by people who have been using her for her money. And so it's an interesting way of looking at, just because she has this money doesn't mean that she's, um, it's not always a benefit to her, although it can be, obviously. We get to see the Proudies again, who are like the bishops, and his wife is very controlling. And they are, part of the low church people. And yeah, so they're always fun to see. They're sort of minor characters in this one. And then we also see the Crawleys. I had almost forgotten about the Crawleys, but Mr. Crawley was friends with the Arabin, and he is a very high church guy, and he's sort of taken he takes on poverty as like a badge of honor, and he looks down on anybody who has money, but then at the same time he also kind of envies them, and he doesn't want to take anything from anybody, even if they can help him. And so we get an interesting story with the Crawleys, and his wife gets sick, and Lucy Robarts comes and like helps his wife, and we get to see a really sweet side of Lucy, because she's coming to take care of his wife, while she has a very contagious disease, and she's putting that aside to come and help because there's nobody else that's able to help. And then Fanny Robarts takes their children, and so you see like the community coming together to help each other, and I really enjoyed that part of the book as well. But the main thing I think with this book that I enjoy, and Anthony Trollope, like I said in my wrap-up, does a really good job of it, is talking about money. I didn't look up exactly how much money Mark Robarts ends up owing, because he owes different amounts at different points because of how the money gets moved around. But he describes it at one point as being over 6 months of pay that he owes, and he doesn't have any savings. And partly why he doesn't have any savings is because he was raised with the Luftons, and he sees all these things as being necessities, but he's living as a clergyman and not making enough money to have all of these necessities, and it sort of puts him in this strange world where he's used to these luxuries, but then he doesn't have the means to provide them all the time. And so, Anthony Trollope does a great job talking about money, class, in this case also with women, when we talk about beauty, what makes a marriageable wife, what is like, you know, and of course Anthony Trollope, errs on the side of a woman who's smart, who knows her mind, who is, of course there is still that Victorian ideal, but, you don't want a woman who just looks like a China doll, doesn't have anything in her head. Like, that's sort of what Anthony Trollope goes for. And I would even say in a lot of Anthony Trollope's books, he's not very kind to very young people, especially young women. And he's much more sides on the fact like, well, it's better to have a woman who's older, who knows things, who's, isn't just a child coming out of her dad's house. Yeah, she might be pretty, but she doesn't have as much to offer, which I think is a very interesting, it's not something that you would necessarily expect of a man from that time period. So I find that interesting as well. And then we get this sort of domestic life that feels very real between Fanny and Mark, that's very enjoyable, and actually seeing into their marriage and how they interact with each other, and the dynamics of their relationship, which I also really enjoyed. So I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I liked it more than Dr. Thorne. I think partially because we do have the money aspect. We get more of the church politics that Anthony Trollope does so well. The love story is much better in this one. Lucy Robards is 10 times better than Mary Thorne. I like her so much more. And then we also have all these different groups. So when you have a longer book, it's nice to be able to jump between these different groups. So I enjoyed that as well. So if you're, yeah, so all of these books could be standalones. Like you could read Framley Parsonage without having read The Warden and Barchester Towers and Dr. Thorne. It does give you that extra sort of layer of like knowledge of who these people are. I would recommend, if you're not interested in reading one of the books in the series, to just read like a little Wikipedia, or I don't know, like a synopsis that you can find, because the plots aren't that in depth. It's more the experience of reading it. And so if you really don't want to read one of the books, you can get the same like knowledge of who the people are without maybe reading, like if you want to skip a book or something. That would be my recommendation. All right, so thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.